Okay, guys. So today we're going to be seeing a new section of the TOEFL test. On Friday, we finished looking at the reading section. And now we're going to start moving on. We're going to move on to the listening section of the test. Okay, guys, the listening section, remember that the listening is the second question of the test, the one that comes right after the reading. It's over 30. That's the maximum amount of points that you can get, just like the other sections. And let's take a look at the structure of the listening section. The listening section will contain two types of content. You guys will have to hear two types of audio files and then answer multiple choice questions about those audio files that you guys heard, okay? So it basically consists in that. You listen to an audio and then you answer questions about the audio that you heard. Now you will have two types of content in the audios. The first one is going to be conversations. So you will be listening to very casual conversations, I'd say, conversations related to university life. They are usually 3 minutes long, and you guys will get 5 questions per conversation. Okay, so you will hear 2 conversations. Each one is about 3-4 minutes long sometimes, and each one contains 5 different questions. And then on the other hand, you will also have to hear lectures. This is perhaps the most difficult part of this, because you won't have to hear something so casual anymore, but instead you will be hearing university classes. So this is all academic content. You will have to hear 2 lectures about science, history, literature, let's say, I don't know, anthropology, whatever. But these are all academic topics. So you have lectures and you have conversations. You get 1 more question per lecture. You get 6 questions per lecture, and they are a little bit longer as well. They are from 3 to 5 minutes long. Okay, guys? In total, you guys will have 36 minutes to answer all of the questions. If you guys count how many questions you have 10 questions here, right? 2 times 5, 10. And you have 18 questions here. 3 times 6, 18. So that means that how many questions would you have in total? If you have 10 questions in the conversations and 18 in the lectures, how many questions do you have in total?
28, teacher.
Exactly, 28 questions. So you will have 36 minutes for the 28 questions that you have. Now, this is important for me to say because it's similar to the reading section. It's very similar to the reading section in terms of the fact that you will not have a separate timer. No les van a dar un temporizador por separado, es decir, uno para cada set de conversación, otro para cada lecture. No, you will get your 36 minutes for the entire listening section. It's up to you how you organize this time. Technically, you have about 1 minute and a half per question. So let's say 1 minute and 20 seconds per question. The only rule, to be honest, is don't get stuck. That will be the only rule. The good thing about the listening is that it's not like the reading section. Remember that in the reading section, you could read the passage again, right? The question was on the left and the passage was on the right. And the question was like, what is true about this from paragraph 2? So what you needed to do was you needed to go back to the paragraph, read around the paragraph, search for the answer. In this case, you don't have that opportunity. You only hear the conversations in the lectures once, which means that when you guys get a question, it's pretty straightforward. Either you know the answer or you don't. Either you remember or you don't. You can never like search for the information, search for the answer, right? So that means that you should not spend too much time in every question because you know if you know the question, if you know the answer, and if you don't, you just guess. It's not like the reading, remember. En el reading, ustedes podían leer el pasaje de nuevo. Entonces, la pregunta 2 era del pasaje, del párrafo 2, entonces veían párrafo 2, buscaban, podrían tardarse ahí 5 minutos buscando la información. Si no entendían, leer 1 y 2, 3 veces. Acá en el listening no hay eso. Acá escuchan una vez el audio y cuando tienen la pregunta, o saben la respuesta o no. No hay forma de volver a escuchar una parte o nada de eso. Entonces, you basically depend on your notes and on your memory, ¿no? Dependen de sus notas y de su memoria, but overall your memory, sobre todo sus notas. Entonces es bastante sencillo en ese sentido, no tienen por qué pasarse el tiempo, ¿no? Pasarse de 1 minuto o de 30 segundos, diría yo, porque simplemente leer las opciones y leer la pregunta y ya. Entonces, no deberían tener problemas con el tiempo, pero en general, no se detengan. Don't spend more than 1 minute in every question. If you don't know the answer, guess. Si no saben la respuesta, forzadamente tienen que adivinar. No es como en el reading, donde técnicamente podían dejarlo en blanco. Aquí en el listening, para poder ir a la siguiente pregunta, sí o sí tienen que seleccionar uno. Entonces adivinen. Y si van a adivinar, lo mismo que en el reading les dije, pongan la misma opción a todas las que adivinan, ¿no? What else? Some things that you can and cannot do in the list. It's not like the reading. No es como el reading. Es muy diferente en este sentido. Because you guys, you can't go back. You can go back to the previous question. So if you click on next, then there's no way that you can go back to the previous question. You can jump around. You can go to, let's say, jump question 2 and go to the third. And you can't review your answers at the end. Entonces, no dejen tiempo extra para revisarlo, como en el reading. En el reading sí pueden revisar al final. Y en el listening, no. Entonces, you can go back, you can jump around, you can review your answers at the end. You can leave blank answers, as I was telling you. You only listen once. The questions will appear on your screen one by one after you have heard the audio. That means that you can't answer the questions at the same time that you're listening. If you want to do that, you can do it. And you can't see all of the questions at once. The questions generally go in order, in the same order as the information was given to you. So that is helpful, to be honest. And okay, that's it. Okay, guys, those are some general things that you need to know about the listening section. You get one timer, you get 28 questions, 36 minutes. Conversations and lectures, multiple choice. You can go back, you can jump around, you can review, you can leave blank answers. Okay, guys, spend 1 minute in every question at most. Is that okay so far? Do you have any question perhaps in terms of the structure, the format, the things you can and cannot do? Anything at all?
Teacher, good evening. I just coming and I have a question. I was just wondering if you share a link with of this presentation before I join.
No, I didn't share the link, but I can do it now in case you guys want to. Well, so for you to have it, and also if you want to, let's say, follow the class from your own computers, perhaps. I haven't.
Thank you so much.
Yes, of course, one. Right. Any other question? Okay, guys. So what we're going to do today and tomorrow is we're going to be working on the conversations. We're going to start easy and start on the conversations. And then today's our theory class. Tomorrow will be our practice lesson. Then on Thursday, we'll be doing lectures. And finally, Friday, we'll be practicing lectures. Okay, guys, so today let's start with conversations. Let's see what we can do about conversations. First of all, I want to say that, to be honest, in order for you guys to improve your listening skills, what you have to do is just practice listening as much as you can. Try to hear different contents, especially I would say regarding the lectures, because conversations, I think you'll find it easy, but just practice. Practice listening to different things with their transcripts or with subtitles. Try to learn and expand your vocabulary as well, and you'll get better. And obviously the question types and all of it, But most importantly is practicing listening. That's just a matter of practice. So let's see, what are these conversations? How are they going to be? What do you have to do? How are the questions? Let's talk about that. These conversations will always take place inside an American university, right? They will take place inside an American university. And basically, in the conversations, you're always going to hear two people speaking. It's always two speakers. One of them is a student from this university, and the other speaker is going to be a university worker, a university employee, somebody who works for the university. So you have the student on one hand, and you have the university employee on the other. Okay, guys? And the two of them are going to have a conversation. Now, what is this conversation going to be about? Well, the student always wants something, needs something, or has a problem. It's always about something that the student wants. It's always about helping the student. So for example, in some cases, the student has problems. Let's say that the student has a problem with finding a book. So maybe the student went to the library, but the student can't find the book that they are looking for. In that case, the student is probably going to be talking with who's the person in charge of the library? The librarian, right? So maybe the student goes to the librarian and he's like, hey, I'm sorry to interrupt. Maybe this librarian is doing something. Excuse me, can you help me find this book? I'm searching for this book because I need to work on an assignment about it. And then the librarian is going to help the student find the book or maybe find alternatives if the book is not there. So you will have an entire conversation starting from that point of the problem that the student had, right? Maybe the student has a problem with accommodation. Remember that American universities generally have on-campus dormitories, right? So that means that students, not all students, but most students tend to live inside the university during their study time, right? So you have dormitories, which are called dorms as well. So maybe let's say that the student has a problem with accommodation. So the student wants to find or wants to change roommates for some reason. So the student is probably going to talk to the accommodation officer, right? So depending on what the student wants, the student is going to be talking to somebody who works in the university. Maybe the student just wants information. Maybe the student wants to, let's say, start a new club. So the student wants to start a new club. So the student is going to talk to somebody, let's say the advisor. Maybe the student wants to change majors. So the student will go talk to, let's say, the academic advisor, right? And there we have a lot of people who work in the university. Can you guys maybe think of some other people that work inside the university? Or other people that work for universities?
Maybe a teacher, a professor.
Exactly. I guess we're forgetting the main one, right? Professors. We call university teachers, we call them professors. So maybe the student maybe the student has questions about an assignment. So they'll go talk to the professor. Maybe the student wants to know something about his grade. So same thing, they'll go to the professor. So yes, professors, librarians, accommodation officers, advisors. I don't know, like you guys need to think about American universities because you know that things work a little bit differently in terms of the educational system. So my suggestion for this part specifically of the podcast is make sure that you guys become familiarized with how an American university works. Because if you don't know, then it may be a little bit difficult to understand. And also if you don't have the vocabulary, right? Because remember that around this part of the world, universities work differently, right? For example, the fact that students live in universities is something not so common, at least here in Bolivia, where I live. Most of you guys, I think you're from Bolivia. So it's not something that we have or that it's so common in Bolivia. So maybe words like dormitories, which are basically students' rooms inside the university. So maybe this is a word that you guys don't know because obviously we're not familiarized with this vocabulary. So my suggestion is become familiarized with these type of things, you know. Also, let's say the dinner hall, right? Where students have their meals, right? Let's say breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, whatever. Student centers, right? So these are services that perhaps we don't have here, but that you need to know, that you need to become familiarized with this context, with this information, so that you are not lost when you're listening to this conversation, because it can be about everything, you know? So make sure that you have some vocabulary, also academic vocabulary, you know, like maybe submitting an assignment. If you don't know what the word submit is, then you're lost. If you don't know what the word assignment is, you're lost. You know homework, and you know presentar, right? But submit an assignment. So make sure that you study some vocabulary related to university life. By the way, I'm going to share with you guys a word list that I have that I think I haven't shared before that contains vocabulary related to university life. Okay, but this is not everything that you have to do. I really suggest that you try to learn this vocabulary with context. So let's say go and watch a YouTube video about a day in the life of a student, of a Harvard student, let's say, right? So that way you can try to see how it works. Maybe you can listen to some student podcasts, university podcasts. And that way you're going to actually take in all of that new vocabulary and information. Because otherwise, if you just memorize a couple of word lists, then it's not going to be of much use, you know? So those will be some things that I need to say. This is the vocabulary that I was telling you about. In this PDF, you guys will be able to find a couple of expressions and words related to the most common topics in the speaking and writing sections, but it also includes some topics from the listening, like education, right? To attend classes, to call attendance, to major in something, right? To be a math major, an architecture major, boarding school, remote learning, I don't know, feedback, and things related to school, right? Maybe the student wants to take a gap year, tuition fees, library fees, failing a test, enrolling in a class, enrolling in a club, right? So I'm sending you guys this word list now, but as I told you, you need to go farther and you need to try to see this vocabulary with context. Guys, so I'm sending you this. Do you have any questions so far?
No, teacher. Everything's fine.
All right, thank you. So, how to take notes. You guys have to take notes, but you have to focus more on listening, especially for the conversations. I totally say that you can make it without even taking so many notes or without even taking notes at all. However, I do recommend you take your notes. First of all, what we said before, I think we said this when we were in the writing section, I think, take notes in the way that you will take notes in the actual test, right? If you guys are taking the test at home, then use a whiteboard, use transparent sheet. If you guys are taking the test in a test center, write your notes down on normal paper, but don't ever type your notes or anything else. First thing, be realistic when you're practicing. Second thing, for the conversations, you want to take notes in this way. You want to have your piece of paper, like don't use a lot of space because it's not necessary for the conversations, but whatever you have, you want to divide your paper into two. Maybe draw a line or something, some sort of separation. And what you want to do is have one side, let's say the left side is going to be for a student, And on the right side, you're going to take notes about whatever the university employee says. Okay, so that way your information is going to be more organized, your notes are going to be more organized, and they will go in the same order. You will know who said what, when in the conversation, and it will be just like you are, let's say, transcribing a conversation, right? So maybe the student is like, hey, I'm sorry, I can't find this book about the history of the United States. I need it for my history class. So you don't have to write everything down. You have to write down only the things that you probably wouldn't remember. So maybe you can say something like, book, I can't find it, so you draw an X, and then you say history of the US, right? And then history class. You obviously are going to only write down the things that you wouldn't normally remember, let's say the details. And then the librarian is going to be like, have you tried searching in the 5th section of the library? So you're going to be like 5th section. And then the student says, yes, I've already tried that, but it isn't there. So you're going to be like, yes, I have tried that, but the book is not there. And then the employee says something like, okay, have you searched it in the database? So you write it down. And then the student is like, oh, I'm sorry, but I don't know how to use the database. So maybe you can say, you can be like, no, I haven't used that. Maybe the student feels a little bit like, I don't know, ashamed that he doesn't know how to use the database. Or he's like, maybe you can identify that from his tone of voice. So maybe you can write down that like sad face sticker. Be like, well, I don't know how to use it. Okay? And then maybe the employee sounds like surprised, and the student is like, wow, really? You don't know how to use the database? So you also consider this type of attitudes that go beyond the information, because some questions are going to be asking about that. And maybe the employee is like, but are you a new student? Or why don't you know how to use the database? So that way you can go back and forth between the student and the employee. I am right now writing down my notes for everything that I'm saying, but you don't necessarily have to do that. To be honest, your focus should be on paying attention and understanding what's going on, like being part of the conversation. And I really recommend that you just write down the details. Like maybe say, let's say the 5th section, something hard to remember, right? Maybe what class it is, maybe what's the name of the book, who's the professor, what time the student should come back. Those details are the ones that you need to write down, not the general information, because that's something that you will remember. But technically, I recommend that you play with information like this, going back and forth between a student and an employee, and that you also take into account things that go beyond the information, right? Because some questions will ask you about that. Is it okay so far? Do you have any questions?
No, teacher.
All right. Okay, guys. As for the question types, there are a couple of question types that we're going to see. But we're not going to do the same as we did in the reading. That means we're not going to be looking at every question type one by one, because that will be a waste of time. To be honest, it's not necessary. The questions here are very similar to the ones we'd already seen in the reading. What we're going to do is we're going to see them with actual examples. We're going to do one conversation and try to see what question types we have here. In general, the questions that you will have for conversations are main idea is one, function and purpose. We don't have organization, attitude, the inference and detail. Okay, guys? The main idea question is always the one that you get in the beginning, the one that asks about the idea of the conversation. It asks you kind of to summarize the conversation. So in order for you guys to answer this main idea, which is usually the first question that you get, you guys need to be paying close attention to the first 30 seconds of the conversation. Okay, guys? So you will find the answer to this question in the first 30 seconds of the conversation, and that's why you need to be paying close attention to understand. Then you have function and purpose that usually asks about what the professor means when he says something, what the student means when he says something. So they want you to interpret things a little bit. They play the audio again for you. They play you a part of the conversation, and they're like, what does the professor mean when he says this? Or what does this mean? Why does the professor say this? What is the professor trying to express with this? So you will listen again to part of the conversation in this case, which means that you don't need your notes to answer this question. You will have the part of the conversation there. Then you have attitude questions, which are related to what I was just telling you, the attitudes behind the words. So what is the student, how is the student feeling? How does the student feel about something? What's the student's opinion, the professor's attitude? Does the professor feel surprised, disappointed? Does the student feel ashamed? Is the student stressed? Is the student relaxed? So they talk about the attitudes. Again, that's why you need to pay attention to the context of the conversation, the tone of their voices, the things that they are implying. Then you have inferences, which is exactly the same as what we did for the reading. Remember, inference questions, what can be inferred. And then finally, you have detailed questions, which are exactly the same as the reading as well, that ask about specific details in the audience, right? Like, what was the name of the professor? What was the section? What was the class? What was the book? So they ask for specific details. However, these are not like very complicated details. So don't worry, they won't be asking you like, what date was the professor born, let's say. But they will be asking about details that you should be able to understand to have a good understanding of the conversational world. Okay, guys, as I said, we're not going to go one by one. We're going to see them with examples. So we're going to hear a conversation and let's look at the questions, and I'll give you some tips as to how to answer each one of them. Okay, guys? Do you have any questions about this so far? Okay, guys, pretty well. In that case, we're going to look at an example, and we're going to be using the ETS example. So we're going to say ETS listening practice. And we're going to do the one that they have so that you can be close to what you'll have in the actual test, you know, and you're not looking at something entirely different. So please get ready to take notes, get a piece of paper and a pen or your whiteboard or whatever it is that you're using to take notes according to how you know the test. And let's see.
Listening section directions. The listening section of the TOEFL IBT test measures your ability to understand conversations and lectures in English. In an actual test, the listening.
Listen to a conversation between a student and a professor.
Hi, Professor Mason. Do you have a minute?
Yes, of course, Eric. I think there was something I wanted to talk to you about, too.
Probably my late essay.
Ah, that must have been it. I thought maybe I'd lost it.
No, I'm sorry. Actually, it was my computer that lost it, the first draft of it. And, well, anyway, I finally put it in your mailbox yesterday.
Oh, and I haven't checked the mailbox yet today. Well, I'm glad it's there. I'll read it this weekend.
Well, sorry again. Say, I can send it to you by email, too, if you like.
Great. I'll be interested to see how it all came out.
Right. Now, I just overheard some graduate students talking. Something about a party for Dean Adams?
A retirement party, yes. All students are invited. Wasn't there a notice on the anthropology department's bulletin board?
I don't know, but I wanted to offer to help out with it. You know, whatever you need. Dean Adams, well, I took a few anthropology classes with her, and they were great, inspiring. And, well, I just wanted to pitch in.
Oh, that's very thoughtful of you, Eric, but it'll be pretty low-key. Nothing flashy. That's not her style.
So there's nothing?
No, we'll have coffee and cookies. Maybe a cake, but actually a couple of the administrative assistants are working on that. You could ask them, but I think they've got it covered.
Okay.
Actually, oh, no, never mind.
What is it?
Well, it's nothing to do with the party, and I'm sure there are more exciting ways you could spend your time, but we do need some help with something. We're compiling a database of articles the anthropology faculty has published. There's not much glory in it, but we're looking for someone with some knowledge of anthropology who can enter the articles. I hesitate to mention it, but I don't suppose this is something you would...
No, that sounds kinda cool. I'd like to see what they're writing about.
Wonderful. And there are also some unpublished studies. Did you know Dean Adams did a lot of field research in Indonesia? Most of it hasn't been published yet.
No, like what?
Well, she's really versatile. She just spent several months studying social interactions in Indonesia, and she's been influential in ethnology. Oh, and she's also done work in South America that's closer to biology, especially with speciation.
Not to seem uninformed.
Well, how species form. You know, how two distinct species form from one, like when populations of the same species are isolated from each other and then develop in two different directions and end up as two distinct species.
Interesting.
Yes. And while she was there in South America, she collected a lot of linguistic information and songs. Really fascinating.
Well, I hate to see her leave.
Don't worry, she'll still be around. She's got lots of projects that she's still in the middle of.
Why does the man go to see the professor?
Hey guys, so before we start answering the questions, let's sleep this for a second. I wanted to talk to you guys about the conversation in reality. Can you tell me what it was about? How would you summarize it? What was it about? What would you say? What was the conversation about? Anyone? Really, nobody?
The conversation teacher talks about a student who goes to visit his professor.
And what do they talk about?
They start talk about he they start talking about his assignment, which is going his late assignment.
Is that everything they talk about?
They started talking about this late assignment, and then they talk about a party end course.
Yes.
I think a lost object.
I don't know, it wasn't a lost object. They talk about a retirement party for one of the professors in the faculty. What else? They talked about one more thing.
The professor asked
Anthropology.
his student to help her with the database of anthropology.
Exactly. Perfect, exactly. So as you guys can see, they talked about different things. It wasn't like a linear conversation when they were talking about the assignment throughout the entire conversation. They changed subjects. And this is something very common in the conversations. Students and professors and the other person who's there changing subjects, okay? So they started talking about the late assignment, then they went to talk to the retirement, about the retirement party, and finally they talked about this project with the database. Now, the first question, well, first of all, I want you guys to be sure to differentiate the topic in general. So if we ask ourselves, so what was this conversation about? Then you would have to tell me. It was about the assignment, it was about the retirement party, and it was about the project. It was about these three things. That is the topic, right? If I ask you what it was the conversation about, then you can say the assignment, the party, and the project. But it's completely different if I ask you, why does the student go to see the professor? In that case, which of these three is the correct answer?
First one?
You sure?
Yes.
What does the rest think? Are you guys sure?
Yes, teacher.
No, it's not the late assignment. The fact that it came first, it doesn't mean that that was the thing why the student went to see the professor. I want you guys to listen to the first part again, okay? Remember I told you, during the first 30, 40 seconds, you should be paying close attention. We're going to listen again to that first part only. And I want you to actually analyze how the conversation goes. See?
Listening section directions.
Listen to a conversation between a student and a professor.
Hi, Professor Mason. Do you have a minute?
Yes, of course, Eric. I think there was something I wanted to talk to you about, too.
Probably my late essay.
Ah, that must have been it. I thought maybe I'd lost it.
No, I'm sorry. Actually, it was my computer that lost it, the first draft of it. And, well, anyway, I finally put it in your mailbox yesterday.
Oh, and I haven't checked the mailbox yet today. Well, I'm glad it's there. I'll read it this weekend.
Well, sorry again. Say, I can send it to you by email, too, if you like.
Great. I'll be interested to see how it all came out.
Right. Now, I just overheard some graduate students talking. Something about a party for Dean Adams?
Retirement party, yes. All students are invited. Wasn't there a notice on the anthropology department's bulletin board?
I don't know, but I wanted to offer to help out with.
Retirement.
Listen to part of a lecture.
Retirement parties.
Exactly, the retirement party. So it's a little bit tricky because the student goes to see the professor and the student is like, hey, do you have a minute? And then the professor is like, yes, actually there was something that I wanted to talk to you about. So the professor wanted to talk to the student about the assignment, but the student didn't go to see the professor to talk about the assignment. The student wanted to see the professor to offer to help volunteering in the retirement party, right? So learn to differentiate the topics of the conversation versus the intention of the student. Okay, guys? Because you will need that skill for the first question. The main idea question, there are two types of main idea question. The one that you get in the beginning, the first question, can be like the one we have here. Fernando, can you please read the question we have?
Why does the man go to see the professor?
Okay? So in this case, this question asks about the reason why the student went to see the employee. That is one type, when they ask about the intention of the student. The student's problem, the student needs, whatever the student wanted. And then the other question is when they ask you to summarize, and they are like, what was the conversation mainly about? Those two are sometimes, and this is tricky because it's always the main idea, and it's always the first question. So sometimes you think that it's always going to be a summary, and you're so used to that being your first question that you always choose a summary, when in reality there are two types of main idea. The one that asks about the reasons why the student went to see this person, and the other one that asks you to summarize the entire conversation. In this case, they are asking about the reason why the student went to see the professor. So what would be the correct choice in this case?
The last one.
Last one, exactly. To volunteer to help organize an event. And that is correct. Is that okay so far? Do you have any questions about this first main idea question type?
Teacher, so in this case, all the conversations in general to answer that questions?
What do you mean by that? In this conversation specifically, or are you asking me about all of the conversations?
All the conversation.
Depends, right? It depends. If the question in the conversation is like this, why does the student go to see the librarian, the professor, whatever it is, whoever it is, then that means that they're asking about the intention of the student, right? So you need to analyze what the student problem was, what the student wanted, what the student needed. But if they ask what was the conversation mainly about, then in that case, they're asking about the entire conversation, not necessarily what the student wanted to talk about, but the entire conversation. So you need to make sure that you read carefully the question and that you distinguish between those two different types of ideas, right? The intention of the student versus what the conversation ended up being about. Because it's very common for them to change topics. Okay? Is that okay?
Yes, teacher.
Yes, teacher.
Okay, guys, perfect. Let's go to the next question.
How did the man learn about Dean Adams's retirement?
So, this is a detailed question. They're asking about a specific detail, right? How, when, where, who, what time. So, in this case, for detailed questions, there's not much that you can do. There's not much that I can tell you. I'm going to give you some tips, but there's not much that I can tell you. Because you either remember the answer, you have it in your notes, or maybe you don't. Maybe you didn't catch this part. So what would you say in this case? Do you know how the student learned about Dean Adams' retirement? Does anyone remember? Anybody that has it on their notes?
Maybe he heard other students discussing it.
Exactly. So one tip that I can give you for detailed questions is what I already said. Remember to separate the information that you get from the student and to separate the information that you get from the professor. Because I don't know if you guys remember this exactly as it was, but on one side, the student was like, I wanted to help in this retirement party for Dean Adams. And then the professor, let's say this is the student, right? In your notes, the student, and this is the professor. So the student was like, I wanted to offer to help volunteering in the retirement party. So offer volunteer retirement party. And then the professor is like, oh yes, it was posted in the bulletin board because this is true. This is true information. The professor said, yes, it was posted in the bulletin board. And then the student is like, well, I don't know. So you're like, okay, the student doesn't know. And the student says, I overheard other students talking about it. So that's why it's important that you separate the information, because it's pretty easy to get confused. In the options, you have this option. How does the student learn? Because he was posted or because he overheard other students. In this case, the correct answer is obviously what the student says, because they're asking about how the student learned about this. They're not asking what is true, because it is true that this was posted in the bulletin board, right? But the student is the one that learned by overhearing other students, like hearing other students' conversations. So he heard other students discussing. That is one tip, separate the information. Second tip would be to always make sure that the option that you're choosing makes sense. The option that you're choosing actually answers the question. To be honest, options, the first and the second, to me, are more likely to be the ones than option B and D. If I didn't know anything, if I hadn't heard anything, I would choose between A and C, because these answer the question more directly. The question is, how did he learn? ¿Cómo se enteró? Right? So maybe he read about it, maybe he heard about it. Pero, por ejemplo, la B que dice, it was posted, no está respondiendo tan directamente a la pregunta. No sé si se entiende esta parte, ¿no? ¿Cómo se enteró? Estaba publicado, ¿no? Estaba publicado no responde directamente a la pregunta. Más directamente sería si dijera, por ejemplo, he read it on a bulletin board. Ahora sí estaría respondiendo directamente a la pregunta, ¿no? Él lo leyó en la pizarra, ¿no? He read it on a bulletin board. Pero it was posted no responde directamente a la pregunta. Lo mismo acá, Dean Adams announced it in her class. No responde tan directamente a la pregunta como la opción C, por ejemplo. En cambio, si diría, he heard it from Dean Adams. Entonces, ahí estaría directamente respondiendo a la pregunta, ¿no? Obviamente, este es solamente un tip en caso de que no sepan la respuesta, cuáles son más probables, ¿no? Las que responden directamente a la pregunta. Pero más importantemente, la información separada, ¿no? Para no confundirse, porque siempre va a haber cosas que se mencionaron, pero que no responden a la pregunta. Cosas que son ciertas, pero que no responden directamente a la pregunta. ¿Ves? Y también que tengan sentido. Por ejemplo, si sabemos que se trata de la fiesta de retirement, jubilación, ¿no? De jubilación de Dean Adams. Entonces probablemente no lo anunció en su clase, ¿no? Además que creo que era sorpresa, no sé, pero también pueden analizar. Okay. So any questions about this one? Shall we answer? All right.
Why does the professor refuse the man's offer to help with the party?
Another detailed question. Otra pregunta de detalle, ¿no? ¿Por qué? Why, how, when, where, detailed questions. Lo mismo. We have to click on 2 answers in this case, so 2 out of 4. What do you guys think? What are the correct options?
The second one?
Okay. And? And the other?
I don't know, but maybe the third one.
Okay. So for these questions, another tip that I can give you is please, and it's the same as the reading, lo mismo que en el reading les había dicho, ¿no? Con las preguntas de detalle, la información va a ser siempre explícitamente mencionada en el contenido, ¿no? Nunca tienen que sacar conclusiones. Entonces, por ejemplo, nosotros sabemos que es verdad que ella le pide al estudiante que trabaje en este proyecto, ¿no? Entonces, eso es algo que sabemos como hecho. Pero, ¿acaso ella dice que prefiere que en lugar de la fiesta use su tiempo en otro proyecto en vez de la fiesta? no dice explícitamente lo que ella prefiere, ¿no? Simplemente le pide ayuda con el proyecto. Entonces, no podemos nosotros inferir qué es lo que ella prefiere, qué es lo que ella quiere, a no ser que ella lo diga, ¿no? O a no ser que la pregunta sea inference, ¿no? ¿Qué se puede inferir? What can be inferred about the reasons why the professor refused the men's offer? En ese caso, ¿qué se puede inferir sobre las razones por las que el docente se negó? Podríamos inferir tal vez opción B, ¿no? Pero si no te dicen what can be inferred o tal vez qué se refiere o qué implica el profesor, entonces en ese caso no podemos sacar conclusiones. Ella nos dice explícitamente que él prefiere que use su tiempo en otra cosa. What she says is, well, it's something low key. It's really not a lot. I think she says that it's just coffee and cookies, maybe a little cake. So basically she says there that it doesn't need much preparation, ¿no? Dice que es algo de bajo perfil, solo galletas y café, because she doesn't like anything flashy. Dice, no, it's nothing flashy, nada muy grande, nada muy preparado. Entonces, the party doesn't require much preparation. Y además le dice que tampoco es necesario porque una pareja de administradores, o sea, no pareja romántica, pero dos personas administradoras, ya están organizándolo, ¿no? Dice, a couple of administrators are already working on it. You could ask them, but I think they got it covered. Eso es lo que dice, ¿no? Les puedes preguntar, pero creo que ya lo tienen. Entonces, lo que dice ella explícitamente es que ya están trabajando en ello y que no es nada grande, ¿no? Entonces, no podemos inferir y tampoco escojamos cosas que no tengan sentido. Por ejemplo, Dean Adams is not permanently leaving the department. Sabemos que todo esto es un retirement party, ¿no? Jubilación. Sí está ahí, se está yendo. Otros tips que les puedo dar para las detail en general, reading y listening, nunca saquen conclusiones. Y guys, then we have.
Why does the professor talk about speciation?
Este es lo mismo que el purpose question reading, ¿no? ¿Por qué? Why did the professor talk about speciation? Para ese tipo de preguntas, lo que les recomiendo siempre es nunca escojan opciones que son detalladas. Porque acuérdense que tenemos siempre la misma estructura, tanto en el reading como en el listening. Tenemos ideas grandes y luego tenemos detalles, ¿no? Ideas generales y detalles. Por ejemplo, en el anterior caso, el profesor dice algo como, well, I don't think it's necessary, por ejemplo, y luego empieza a explicar los detalles de por qué no es necesario. Two people are already working on it, it's nothing big, it's nothing flashy. Entonces, primero siempre la idea principal y luego la explicación, los detalles. Entonces, si te preguntan por qué alguien menciona algo específico, tiene que ser para ayudar, para probar una idea más grande, ¿no? Entonces, ese puede ser un consejo que les puedo dar para esto. So why do you think the professor talks about speciation? Anyone? Nobody?
Mm,
If you don't know, you have to guess, remember. I mean, when were they, también siempre preguntan, ¿en qué momento dijeron eso? ¿No? ¿En qué momento el profesor habló de speciation? Cuando estaban hablando del proyecto, para empezar, ¿no? Entonces, si tuvieran una opción que hable la fiesta,
Mm, Number 2.
number 2. Okay, give me a second, please. I'll plug in my computer.
Ethnology.
Okay, to tell the men about no research area in ethnology, podría ser, pero estaban hablando de Dean Adams, ¿no? They were talking about Dean Adams when they said this. And I think, like, I mean, they weren't really talking about ethnology. They were talking about anthropology, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Or maybe we need to hear again. Yeah.
You can only hear one. In this case, for example, I would eliminate options B because they weren't talking about ethnology, they were talking about anthropology, and option C because of what I was telling you, no? It doesn't have to be, it cannot be something specific, but option C to explain what Dean Adams chose to work on Indonesia is such a specific thing, it doesn't make sense, right? Because that wasn't the main idea. Like the Dean Adams' work on Indonesia is not a main idea, right? It's a detail. Entonces probablemente no sea ni B ni D, ni B ni C, perdón. Ahora, to describe the main focus of the work she needs help with, ¿se acuerdan qué era lo que necesitaba que haga el estudiante? Simplemente,
To explain or
no. We just enter the articles into the database, ¿no? Simplemente es poner los artículos en la base de datos.
okay, yes.
Entonces, probablemente no. Tampoco sea, o sea, nada de speciation, no es el trabajo que tiene que hacer. Es opción D, to demonstrate how varied Dean Adams' research has been. Lo que dice el profesor exactamente, bueno, no sé si exactamente, pero más o menos dice, did you know that Dean Adams has done research in different parts of the world? And then the student's like, oh, really? And she's like, yes, she's really versatile. Esa palabra era clave. Dice, ella es muy versátil. She's really versatile. Y luego empieza a dar muchos ejemplos, no siempre idea general. La idea general que Dean Adams es muy versátil en su trabajo. Y luego los ejemplos. Mencionan trabajos de speciation en Indonesia, en Sudamérica, no sé dónde más. Pero todos esos son los detalles que apoyan a esta idea de que ella es versátil, ha hecho diferentes tipos de trabajos en diferentes lugares. Entonces, la idea general, she is very versatile, to demonstrate how varied Dean Adams' research has been. Estaban hablando de Dean Adams y mencionaron, ella mencionó que es muy versátil. Y luego empieza a dar los detalles. Siempre los detalles contribuyen a la idea general, ¿no? A la idea más grande. Entonces, no es D, no es ethnology y tampoco es el trabajo que necesita ayuda, ¿no? Por eliminación tal vez podría. Yes, let's see another one.
Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
There's not much glory in it, but we're looking for someone with some knowledge of anthropology who can enter the articles. I hesitate to mention it, but I don't suppose this is something you would.
Why does the professor say this?
I hesitate to mention it, but I don't suppose this is something you would.
So, why does the professor say that? I hesitate to mention it, but I don't suppose this is something you would. Esto no necesitan acordarse ni notas, ¿no? Es interpretar lo que está diciendo, obviamente en el contexto. What would you say?
The last one?
The project, not being able to offer the project to the man,
No, I think no.
right? Because she actually offers the project to the man. Sí le ofrece el proyecto al estudiante, no es que no le ofrece, no se está disculpando tampoco.
Maybe the second one.
Exacto. Según el contexto, sabemos que le está pidiendo que trabaje en el proyecto, ¿no? No está dudando de sus calificaciones, porque de hecho más bien le dice que es la persona indicada porque tiene conocimiento en el área. No quiere que recomiende a alguien más para el proyecto tampoco, y tampoco se está disculpando por no ofrecerle el proyecto, porque más bien ella es la que le ofreció el proyecto, no es ni idea de. To ask if the man if he will be willing to work on the project. Esa es solamente una forma de preguntar algo amablemente, ¿no? I don't suppose you, es una forma de preguntar amablemente para que la otra persona diga, yes, of course. Like I can say, hey, I needed to buy some groceries. I don't suppose you would have time to give me a ride, would you? ¿No? Entonces, I don't suppose you would have time to give me a ride. It's just a very polite way of asking, please give me a ride, right? It's like asking somebody else to do something for you. I don't suppose you would be interested in working with me, would you? I don't suppose you would want to take me home, would you? So it's just a polite way of asking. I don't suppose. Entonces, incluso dice, I hesitate to mention it, ¿no? Como, I hesitate, no estoy segura si preguntarte, hesitate to mention it. But I don't suppose you would want to do this, would you? Entonces el estudiante dice, yeah, of course I can do it. Entonces, it's just a way of asking, pero más que todo por el contexto, ¿no? Y por eliminación también. Pero el contexto es que ella le está pidiendo al estudiante que trabaje en el proyecto, o le está ofreciendo el proyecto al estudiante. Entonces, podemos también eliminarlo. Okay, guys, entonces, let's show answer, and that's correct. What do you guys think? ¿Se entiende? Obviamente es un ejemplo, vamos a ver más mañana. Pero por lo general, esos son algunos tips. La mayoría, bueno, algunos necesitamos notas, ¿no? Y entender. Pero es cuestión de practicar y entrenar. What do you guys think? Do you have any questions, any comments on what we did today? Okay, guys. So in that case, tomorrow we'll conclude practice. Please don't forget to fill out today's daily survey before you go, and I'll see you guys in class tomorrow.